Hi, my name is Kirsten and welcome. Today we're going to be learning how to make cloud wall decor that can turn any room into a whimsical and magical place. I'm so excited to show y'all how I made these, so let's get started.
Here are the materials you will need: paper lanterns, fairy lights, hot glue gun and lots of hot glue sticks, scissors, clear tacks, fishing line, a paper tube, and lastly, polyfill. We're going to begin by assembling the lanterns. They do come with their own instructions just in case you get confused, but we're going to gently pull apart the lanterns, inserting the narrow part of the wire rack first so that the top is facing up with the hook sticking out, and that's important because that's where we'll be hanging the lanterns once they're finished. Next, we are going to connect the lanterns. You'll need the scissors and the paper tube and the hot glue gun for this part. I'm going to start by cutting into the larger lantern. I usually use the largest one as a base and simply cut a square rectangle into the lantern. You should be able to use regular scissors because the wire in the lantern isn't that thick. Once you do that, match it up to the second one to eyeball a spot that you would like to cut in the second lantern. Just make sure that you are cutting this and are aware that the hook needs to be the top portion of the lantern. What's great about this is the cuts don't have to look perfect or be perfect because they will be covered up at the end of it all. Next, I'm going to grab the paper tube and I'm going to cut it in half. This is just a toilet paper roll that was going to be recycled, but I went ahead and used it for this project. See, I'm going to go ahead and rip into it. It's not that big of a deal. Make it bigger as you need to. I'm going to apply hot glue to one end of the paper tube, and I'm going to stick it in the first hole. Be careful, I got hot glue all over my fingers. And then once that's in there and secure, I'm going to hot glue the other end so that I can put it into the second lantern. And it's usually easiest to try to stick your hand into the top of the lantern and get a grip of the tube from inside so that it can secure a little bit easier. And once that's done, I just go back with super glue and glue the lanterns to themselves just so it's more secure and a steady hold. And once I do that for the top side, I'm going to flip it over and do the same process on the bottom, holding those two lanterns together to secure it. Once the tube is secure, we're going to go ahead and string the lights through the lanterns. So I just go ahead, turn it on to make sure that they work. They do, which is great. I also keep them on throughout the process just because it's easier to guide it that way. So just stick it through the paper tube, thread it into the next lantern, and then I kind of split it in half and make sure lights are in both sides evenly. Once the lights are in, we're going to go ahead and secure the battery pack. I make sure to secure on the bottom rack of the wire because that will be the side that's hanging down closest to the floor once it's hung up. I just go ahead and twist it around a couple times to make sure it's a good hold, and then I apply hot glue. I turn the lights off for this part, and I make sure the screws are facing up, but they'll be facing down once it's hanging, so that if I do have to replace the battery packs, it won't be as big of a hassle. I can just get in there with a screwdriver and replace the batteries. So I just hot glue it, make sure it holds, test out the lights once again, and everything looks great, and we're ready for the next step. Now is when we begin to actually start creating the cloud. This step, you need hot glue in the polyfill, and basically you're just going to put down hot glue and fill in with polyfill on top of it as you go. This is probably the most time consuming step just because it does take quite a bit of polyfill, which is why I got the 32-ounce pack. But just going through and starting to make yourself a good foundation. One important note is to leave the top openings exposed because we still need to tie the fishing lines to the hooks so that we can hang the clouds when we're finished. And once you have the fishing line connected, you can go ahead and just cover the top. Once you have a good base of polyfill, you can go back and start filling in spaces you may have missed. I usually like to do this with the lights inside the lantern on because it kind of helps shine through and find those spaces for you. But since I was filming during the day so that you all could see, they're off because they obviously wouldn't have helped as much in the daylight. But just going through and filling in those holes. Now it's time to thread the fishing line through the hooks on the paper lanterns. I usually do 2 lines per lantern, so I'll do 2 threads on this one, and I usually tie the threads and hot glue them down to the metal wire just to make sure it's really secure. And once the fishing line is on, you're going to want to cut it to the length that you want, and now it's time to secure the tack onto the fishing line. So I create kind of a loop U-shape, hot glue that down, and then once it's hot glued, I will tie the fishing line and then cut the excess off and then hot glue it all again just to make sure it's really as secure as it can be. And lastly, like I said, just cutting all that excess wire to make sure that everything is as uniform as it can be. And now we're finally ready to hang our clouds. I didn't film this part because I didn't use super safe measures, but I wanted y'all to see the final product.
So as you can see, it's a fairly simple DIY project. Some of the steps may take a little bit more time, but it is all worth it in the end because this space is truly so magical and unique, and I'm so excited for my daughter to grow up with such an amazing spot for her to decompress and read and share bedtime stories with her father and I. I'm going to list all the materials down in my comments just so y'all can see what I used, and these are affiliate links, but I just wanted to share the exact products that I use so that you can replicate these in your own homes. And I just want to say thanks again for sticking around and watching, and I'll see you next time.